Yeah, good morning, everyone. Let's start with our daily market commentary. Now, what we see in front of us is basically S&P 500 weekly index. Now, something important about this, as we see on the weekly basis, it is now trying to inch higher towards the zone of 2760. So, yesterday also there was a good upside rally which was seen, and then seeing this follow-up rally at least towards 2560, 2760 is quite possible. Now that is what we are seeing from S&P 500 point of view. If you go inside, let's say even on the daily chart, things are pretty much clear because after 3 days fall, it also opened gap down and tried to turn bullish. Again, it opened small gap down and tried to turn bullish. So there is pretty much a chance of it reaching towards these higher state of one more uptick of 1% or so, and then we can see a downside rally starting into play. Now, after such continuous falls, big falls are not possible. If you go back and see when the small falls, small or sideways movements happen, that is where a continuous fall starts coming in. Okay, always that is the case. So one learning which everyone should understand: when markets fall every day, day in day out, a big fall is never expected, right? Because all the market participants, they tend to be on the bearish side. So if you see over here, gap down went almost sideways and then a big fall comes in. Similarly, if three falls have already happened, there are less chances for a big downside fall to happen as such. And we saw a reversal rally taking place. It might come to these higher levels and then go sideways, and then we can see a good downside. Now, next time when it comes down, it has to go so fast that it breaches this prior level of reversal or prior level of support, and then inches down towards these prior spike level of 25. So that is how things should shape up if there is a big downside which we can expect for. Now, coming back to even DAX, so just going through the index. Now in the DAX formation also, if you see on the weekly front, something very interesting can be observed. Now why I'm trying to bring all this is because we have Italy elections, some global events, and then you have S&P 500 FOMC meeting coming up. So that is where I'm trying to now every day first see what is happening on the global front. And India does not make sense, right? Everything will get followed if something happens on DAX or something happens on S&P. Now, when I see even on DAX, first thing that I see over here, multiple level of supports have been taken around this 12,000 level. So first thing which is very much clear on the weekly front, good amount of support has been taken place around these levels. Now there was a fall straight away towards the base, went up, again a selling came in. So two good selling has been seen, and now we are seeing a small reversal coming in. So, but the important point to understand on the weekly front, it is very much clear that it is at the edge for a bigger fall to come into play, right? So we cannot outrule one possibility of DEX also becoming weak, because as per the weekly index, weekly setup, it is now trading at below support levels and around those edge levels where a good sell-off can easily take place. So keeping that in mind, both the things S&P and Dow right now seem to be bullish for at least couple of days, because a back up rally is being seen. Now let us see how Nifty and Bank Nifty are panning out, and do we see similar kind of trends happening here as well or not. Now when I see on the Nifty front, so this is the weekly chart. Now one thing is pretty much clear, as we were talking yesterday as well, multiple times this 10,300 mark is almost being tested, and this was the point yesterday. Again it came down and made that low, but not to the exact low where it is supposed to be, but still it is trying to inch on the higher side. So one thing is pretty much clear, that there is some kind of resilience coming at the bottom edge, or some kind of pullback which can be seen. So on the weekly chart, they still remain weak. So if I see on the higher front, these are the levels or zone, I can say 10,500 to 10,600, where another round of selling will always come into play. Now let's go on the daily front. So one thing is again clear on the daily front. As you are seeing, it had opened, gap down, went sideways, and then a good pullback rally on the downside was seen. Now the agenda is pretty much clear. When you see such kind of falls happening, one thing will be very clear to us, that it is now trying to go on the sideways zone. So this was the second bottom which was formed, and normally in the second bottom it tries to go on the higher side, which did not happen. So it is now trying to go on the sideways. The important point for Nifty for us to understand, it is only possible for an upside if 10,600 is taken out, right? So it cannot be bullish if 10,600 is not taken out. More than that, if you see, there have been multiple levels where the selling has taken place. 10,525, right? So 10,525 becomes a resistance level where we have seen multiple times selling coming in. Now most important, what happened yesterday was the gap down opening. Now when it opened gap down, again you can see it has to fill this gap. So what's happening for Nifty, there will be a continuous struggle on Nifty at every point. Every 100 points, there is a struggle for Nifty to inch itself on the higher side. Now if you see on the hourly chart, things would be pretty much clear. As we see over here, it basically bounced back in the closing trade, and it was trying to recuperate some of the lost gains. Today it opens straight away gap up, tries to go and inch towards the previous gap, right? So this is where I was trying to say it is very important, because these gap levels, the higher level of 10,600, and then you have multiple sell levels of 525, 530 levels, and then the selling comes in. Now this gap becomes so crucial for Nifty. It is like make or break situation, because if 10,450 is not taken out, right, we do not see any sign of revival in Nifty. So on the weekly front, it remains sideways, agreed. On the daily front, we can clearly see some bearishness, and on the hourly front, it is very clear. 10,450 becomes the milestone for Nifty, right? So that should be kept in mind. Now let's take Bank Nifty. Even on Bank Nifty weekly chart, things were pretty much clear that this was the major support level, as we were talking yesterday, 24,800 to 25,000 zone, and multiple times it has come at these levels, made a spike, and also have inched higher. So it has come back to the same zone. Now when I see on the weekly side, there is a clear uptrend or upswing which is possible on Bank Nifty. So that is from the weekly side. It has come in the support zone, and it has full chances of going on the higher side towards 25,400. Now let's see on the daily chart, the same visibility is there or not. Agreed that there is a support, and as we saw the support coming in, gap up opening today, it has to sustain and go on the higher side. Now what I see on the daily front, there is a small resistance at 25,200, because there was a gap as well, and multiple highs have been made. So it is clearly visible that on the downside, if you go out and see, this level becomes crucial. Like Nifty, 10,450 is important, and for Bank Nifty, I would say 25,200 to 25,400 is the zone where is good amount of resistance is still there. So what we see, obviously it will come to these resistance point because of the pullback rally, but if it does not try to go past these levels, then you are seeing one round of selling off coming in. So try to understand, there might be a small pullback, as we were talking yesterday as well. Once this pullback comes, it will enter in this zone of resistance. I need to understand and see what's exactly happening over here. And if it is not able to cross 25,400, there is a clear sign of downside coming into play, right? So that's pretty much clear. So there is no question mark on that. But now you need to understand, if it comes now on the second, so this was the first time after the big fall trying to make the bottom. This was the second time where it was trying to make bottom, and if it comes on the third time, it will not stop over here. So there will be a clear downside which will be very visible in couple of days or so. So couple of days might spend time around this zone or resistance, and then come Thursday or Friday, you can see a good selling off coming into play, right? So always keep that in mind, because all the indexes are now at a close to the edge on the weekly chart, right? So S&P is trying to inch higher, but higher resistances are intact. DAX is also at the weekly resistance zone. Now you have Bank Nifty, which is trying to inch higher, but the same thing is seen in Bank Nifty, and similar is the case for Nifty as well. So that's from the index point of view. Now let's see what's the gainer and loser. Now before we go there, it's pretty much clear all the metal index would be gaining today, and they are the top gainers because Vedanta, Tata Steel, Hindalco were the guys who were basically being battered down. What we saw was continuous selling was coming in, and that is where the revival comes into play. Even Arvind Pharma yesterday was down, and now it is trying to inch higher. Then you have IndusInd Bank and Indiabulls Housing Finance. So these were some of the stocks, most probably from the gainers list. It is pretty much clear the stocks like Vedanta and Tata Steel are up because of the back of the commodity news. So first they were sold and now they have been bought, right? So that's an uptick which is seen in the commodity space. Apart from that, you also have Yes Bank, which is inching higher. So from the banking side also you have IndusInd Bank, Yes Bank, and yet ICICI Bank is not there, right? So as we were talking about ICICI Bank yesterday as well, ICICI is not putting good amount of support on the higher side, and then that can bring Bank Nifty down, right? So that agenda is pretty much clear. And then again you have Z, which is propping up after being yesterday's loser. In the losing side, what I see is basically a mixed bag of stocks. First, Mahindra, which was inching higher. Apart from that, Coal India, Infratel. So these are the guys all of a sudden has become losers. So they were not continuous loser or not gainer any which ways. But M&M was only one guy who was gainer. But what I see now, there is a broad-based selling which is there. So losers are coming from different sides, not from particular sector or zone. So that is not a good sign. Okay, the important point is Tech Mahindra, which has been inching higher from last 2 days, is now down by 1% or so. So that is more important to understand. Others are like tad bit lower, so that's not a bigger issue. So this is how things are panning out. Now let's take some of the stocks. First stock let's take is basically the metal stock. So Vedanta is what we would be interested in to at least understand what's happening on Vedanta as a counter. Now, what I see over here, as I was saying, continuous downfall was seen on Vedanta, right? And it was pretty much clear that if a bounce back rally will come, the metal stocks has to inch on the higher side. More importantly, something which is very important on Vedanta is this particular setup. So it's basically a green candle followed by two candles where it was gap up, bearish, and this is basically a good setup for an upswing, and that is what happened. And then once it comes back to the same zone, important is to understand whether it can get support around these zones or at the base of Moribazu, and which exactly happened in that way where it opens today gap up and tries to inch or fill the gap which was formed. So Vedanta clearly a winner, and we are pretty much clear why is it so, because of a good up move which is seen right in the morning, back of large amount of selling coming into place. Now let's go out and see even Hindalco. Same is the case with Hindalco. It's no big difference. The point with Hindalco is little different from Vedanta. If you see the setups, Hindalco is basically has come down to a very good level of support. Okay, so if I go out and just try to understand, this is the levels of support where Vedanta is, where Hindalco will be taking support. So it's a strong support zone. One can see around this 225 to 230 range. But one thing which is very much clear, after the gap down and the huge selling which was coming in, at least the selling has stopped. Okay, so after the gap down and selling coming in, what has happened today, it has opened up and tried to test the same base but trying to inch on the higher side. So Hindalco is not looking that strong compared to Vedanta, where it has opened gap up and zooming higher. Hindalco has not done anything of that sort. More than that, there is a strong resistance on the higher side for Hindalco around this 235 to 240 range, right? So that is where Hindalco might find some round of pressure compared to Vedanta. Last is from commodity Tata Steel. So if we see Tata Steel as well has undergone a good uptick. Now this fall which was seen in Tata Steel was back of the news of buying another plant or something, and then you saw uptick coming into Tata Steel. Now important point with this uptick is giving me a strong base for Tata Steel. It basically shows the 640 level becomes very crucial on Tata Steel, and now it is inching down slowly and steadily towards this level. Obviously this will become a very good support, but half of this candle can obviously act like a reversal zone, right? So if you can find any engulfing pattern in this zone around this 550 to 560 mark, it's a clear indication of buy, because your risk reward improves and your risk is only the base 640. So if you get from 650 a good reversal, 10 bucks is your stop loss for Tata Steel, trying itself to inch higher towards these level of 720 or so. So that's from the commodity pack. Let's take the other side of banks. So first is again ICICI Bank, because ICICI Bank has remained weak through and through. The most important to understand when entire bank nifty is trying to inch high, ICICI Bank is not inching higher. So this is clearly a very good understanding of ICICI Bank that we have on the weekly basis, even on the daily basis. If I see continuous support was seen at 309, even after opening gap up, it is now trying to fill the gap, right? So it clearly shows a bearish trend. Why it won't fall all of a sudden to 290 or so? Because already from 325 a good fall has taken place. So again, as I said, for Nifty and Bank Nifty, it will go sideways, and then yet if 309, 3010 is not taken out, you are seeing or you are staring at ICICI coming down to 290 levels, right? So that is how we need to observe, and this will bring additional pressure on Bank Nifty. So Bank Nifty not performing is one of the good chance is ICICI Bank. Now even I see on the early side, it was a good reversal base formation seen at the end of the day. Today it is opening gap up and it is trying to fill the gap. So if it doesn't fill the gap, tries to inch on the higher side, important is the 309, 3010 levels and 315 levels. So these are the range where we need to go out and see and understand ICICI is facing troubles or not. And if it faces, similar is the case for Bank Nifty. Ideally, whatever ICICI will do, Bank Nifty will follow the same, right? There won't be any big difference between Bank Nifty and ICICI Bank. So let's keep an eye on ICICI Bank. Now let's go and see the other bank. Yesterday that we were seeing was Axis Bank. Now Axis Bank was also seemingly weak, but important to understand it is yet below that 530 mark. So what I see over here is this is the point where 530 becomes a strong resistance, and if you see over here, it is trying to inch higher from those points, but if it fails to do so from these levels, a straight 500 point is quite visible on Axis Bank. So out of all the banks, at least two banks on the private side seem to be very weak. One is your Axis Bank and one is your ICICI Bank. Now agreed that it can find a good reversal as we are seeing over here, but the important point to understand is 535, right? This was the gap zone, and if it basically gets stuck in this zone, we will see sideways movement for Axis Bank and one round of selling. So predominantly, if I want to gauge Bank Nifty movement, it is important that I focus on Axis Bank and ICICI Bank, and clearly I can get some clues for Bank Nifty. Now let's see the two strong bank once again. So Yes Bank, as we were seeing, is in the gainer list, apart from Kotak and IndusInd Bank. So Yes Bank, after undergoing a straight away fall to these levels, the support range was already kicking in, and today it opens a slight gap up mode. So that clearly shows a small amount of uptick for Yes Bank, but it is already being corrected also. Now let's take IndusInd Bank and Kotak Bank, which are zooming high in trade. So they have been strong, resilient, even if Bank Nifty has undergone good amount of correction. Now here you see today's opening of IndusInd Bank clearly shows gap up opening above the resistance level. Can have one more round of uptick towards this levels of 750 or so, right? So as we were talking about IndusInd Bank, from last 2 weeks. It's become very strong. Even now, Kotak Bank, after seeing Indus Bank structure, I'm very sure Kotak Bank would be performing the same. So we see Kotak Bank also inching higher towards these levels of 1120 or so. As we see from IndusInd Bank, it is clear from Kotak Bank can also inch towards his lifetime high, right? So, and that is very peculiar to understand when the Bank Nifty is down, and then you have two private banks, IndusInd Bank and Kotak Bank, inching towards 52-week high. That shows the kind of strength which is there in these two private banks. So whenever markets correct, they will correct, and these two stocks are basically the best guys to bet on, right? So that we can keep in mind. Now you have HDFC Bank. Yesterday HDFC Bank was seeming to be a little weak, but let us see, has anything changed for HDFC Bank? Now what I see on HDFC Bank as well, after the gap down and slow downfall which was seen, it is yet in that zone. So one good uptick in Bank Nifty can be bought by HDFC Bank, but it is still going on the sideways. So still HDFC Bank is not out of its side range movement, and that is where I see there will be pressure on Bank Nifty. Coming to auto stocks, Hero Moto and Bajaj Auto. So Hero Moto yesterday at the close of the trade has traded zoomingly fast and recovered some bit, and today it opens gap up, right? So that shows a good positive sign on the auto segment. The important point why I pulled up Hero Moto is the base of this particular Moribazu. This is very important because it has formed a good base at 3525. Now it might go sideways, but there are more chances for him to go out and breach 3620 levels to inch towards 3750. So keep an eye on Hero Moto. It has a good setup done. Obviously at the downside, you need to understand the risk reward and take the trade, but idea is pretty much clear. The target of 3750 range can obviously be there on the cards. Talking about Bajaj Auto as well. So Bajaj Auto has seen large amount of selling from last month or so. So if you see from the top, Bajaj Auto has not been performing through and through, and yet it is going down, right? Even on back of good numbers, Bajaj Auto is not performing. So that is a clear indication that somewhere on the higher side, all the buy people are fixed, or many people have bought at the higher these levels, and that is why again one round of selling comes in after declaring good numbers as well. So one thing to keep understand or keep looking at Bajaj Auto is where you'll find a sharp reversal coming in anytime, right? So keep an eye on that. But Hero Moto remains to be a strong hand compared to Bajaj Auto. So that is how it is. Now the point here is from the auto segment we also have Maruti. Now when you see Maruti, it is pretty much clear. Yesterday also we were speaking about this important gap level where the zooming took place. Now let us see whether this 8757 or 8760 gets maintained or not. And this is the kind of support for Maruti, and it will basically form a good base, and good reversal can be seen on Maruti, right? So we can keep that. So Hero Moto and Maruti seem to be a good bet from the auto segment. Let's see the OMC companies. So IOC yesterday was the only guy who opened gap up, right? And what happened in IOC, even after opening small gap up, a selling was seen. Now that is something which is very important to understand. Even when the market was opening gap down, try to understand 2 days it was gaining, or I can say continuous gainer. I see on the IOC, it opens gap up and then selling comes in, right? So the only stock which is opening gap up when the entire market was down was IOC, right? So that shows one kind of strength which is there in IOC to inch on the higher side. So it is pretty much clear these are only small resistance which is there in front of IOC in order to capture and reach towards 400, right? But market also has to support, and the oil prices have to go down for IOC to zoom up in the trade. So IOC remains to be the strong candidate. Let's also see Hind Petro and BPCL. Are we seeing the similar trends in those or not? So when I see Hind Petro, it is clearly it was forming a good U shape formation, but it opens gap down and now it is inching down. So in Petro has remained sluggish, or I can say now I would not see Hin Petro to be very strong unless 380 is taken out. So Hin Petro is on downtrend or basically the sideways movement, and the last is your BPCL. So BPCL results were very bad, so it basically had suffered from the higher levels, had come down to this zone. The important point of BPCL, it opened gap up, trying to inch up on the higher side, trying to fill the gap, and then the selling comes in. The important point to understand here, at least on BPCL, this gap was not breached. So the 430 and 432 kind of gap which was there was not breached, but on the higher side, even 442 level is not been taken out. Keep an eye on BPCL, because if 442 levels are taken out, straight away 450, 460 is there on the cards. So a small downtake in oil can basically shoot IOC as well as BPCL, right? So IOC is the first contender, then the BPCL, and then comes the Hind Petro. So keep an eye on these three for OMC. Now the another guy called as Asian Paint. So Asian Paint, even from the oil side, one thing is pretty much clear. If you see after a good fall from 1200 towards the down zone which is there, what I understand for Asian Paint, it is pretty much clear that on the higher side there are good resistance at every point. But most importantly, what I try to understand is the base formation. If you see, this was the last base formation which took place for Asian Paint, and still this becomes a very good support zone, right? So what I see from Asian Paint is also now trying to go on the sideways, but any good uptick can basically see Asian Paint towards 1150 or so. That kind of revival can only come in from oil trajectory. So if oil basically retraces back, you will see Asian Paint zooming up in trade towards 1150. So keep that in mind. The OMC stocks, BPIOC and Asian Paint can become one of the good contenders on the upside. Now Asian Paint has a clear indication of gap down opening over here. So 1110 on the minor scale becomes a very good resistance test. Now if you see over here today also, it opened gap up and selling took place. So important point for Asian Paint to revive or zoom high, it has made things clear for us. 1110 and then you have 1115. So these are the gap zones or resistance zone where it should fill. So after a good fall which is seen in the first hour of trade, let us see if it can zoom up on the higher side, take out these levels, and then you can find him inching towards these levels or so. So 1120 becomes a good resistance point. After 1120 there is a clear uptrend of 30 bucks on the cards. Now that will only be brought by downtick of oil. So when oil marketing company starts performing, you can always see Asian Paint whether it is performing or not. And if you get your pattern or setup in Asian Paint, if you do not get trade in oil marketing company, you can look out for Asian Paint to pull up a trade, right? So that is how things are. Let's take a last look on our Nifty and Bank Nifty. So still they are struggling. So Bank Nifty is still opening gap up, but trying to remain on the sideways zone. Clearly not a good sign. And specifically HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, and Axis Bank, all three of them are not supporting Bank Nifty. Now that is one of the good pointers that we already know. Bank Nifty might be facing good amount of resistance. When I see on the HDFC front, even on the hourly side, it opens gap up, tries to fill this particular gap. Now, this is where two things will come into play. The upper gap is tested, it could not go, but important over here is yesterday's close. So if 10,360 is taken out, then there is another round of weakness setting into play. But S&P and DAX are on the upside, so you can find some pullback rally on Nifty and Bank Nifty. But on the higher front, I am pretty much clear. You can basically look at one more down tick coming into play, right? Which might come after a week or so, or after 3 days or so. But uh, it is quite visible, right? And the likeliness is much higher, right? So thank you for joining in. We can connect again tomorrow to understand how it's panning out.